Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and a happy Friday, almost Shabbat. What a week. What 2 weeks it's been, right, so we met Monday a week ago, and a lot has happened since then. A lot has happened since then. I think one of the challenges for me is to try to remember everything that's happened, and also to try to, there's so much to talk about. As will hopefully unfold, and how to bring it to this wonderful group and to be able to discuss together. And it almost feels like that Monday 2 weeks ago almost feels like another world. There has been so much that's happened, for me professionally, personally, for us communally. It just feels very strange actually coming back to this space. But we will start with a letter that I received, because I think it's lovely to remind ourselves what we were talking about last time, because the world has shifted and changed again since then. But we need to still keep coming back to the same ideas. And I think that's what's wonderful to see, that the theme of what we talk about is always current and it's always relevant. And please God, one day, things are going to be calm and things are going to be quiet, and it's still relevant, right? That's the hope. We can still talk about our relationship with God, our faith, our struggles with it. We can still talk about talking to Hashem. We can still talk about prayer. We can still talk about where we sit within that journey. And we don't need anti-Semitic flare-ups, and we don't need personal challenges, and we don't need all the different things that kind of keep bringing it to the fore. Please God, this could just be something that we just talk about and work on, because that's who we are as people. You can say amen. That's the prayer. Okay, so I'm going to start with the letter. Dear Jacqueline, goodness me, what a session we had this morning. So much to unpack, so relevant, and I have to say, Hashem does work in mysterious ways. I was going to speak to you about something in particular, and then the subject was raised this morning. You talked about the Haredi community. My dear late father always said, we need them to remind us of who we are and to keep Judaism alive. We need every ounce of belief, even though we might not agree with the methods of practicing it. Yesterday, one of my grandsons came to visit us. He's a mid-20s young professional from a Shomer Shabbat home. He is now looking to move out, house or flat share with 2 girls and another young man. They are all from similar backgrounds and have been friends for years. Their strict criteria is that their new home must be strictly kosher. However, there will be no insistence on any other religious criteria. He was telling us that a couple of Shabbatot ago, a group of them, all like-minded, met up in the afternoon in the park and were talking about the fact that there is nothing out there for them socially. He mentioned JLE, Chazak, and a couple of other organizations, but they feel that the focus of these groups is to make them more religious or to find them a partner. He mentioned the Rebbetzen in his community, who he likes very much, but whenever she sees him at Shul, she makes a beeline for him, asking how he is, and he knows she's really interested to find out if he's ready to settle down. He and his friends want a group that is interested in engaging with them as young professionals who are not necessarily looking at this point in their lives to get married or to learn about becoming religious. They know that bit already. He even said it would be good if such a group included young marrieds, not just singles. I believe that there is a group called Sparks YJPS, and pointed him in that direction. But I may need to nag a bit, grandma's job, as these young people are so busy with their professional lives that they have little time to explore the options. I said that I know there are occasional Shabbat morning talks in Bushi, specifically for young adults, but that requires attendance at Shul and hosting in Bushi, as most of this group live outside our area. It was at this point that my grandson said, If only Bushy had a tube station. We know the whole story would be different. We might have an influx of young professionals into our community. He said he is particularly interested in volunteering somehow and asked whether I knew of anything which might be suitable. I had pointed him in the direction of JVM. This morning, he messaged me and told me he was amazed at the number of available opportunities. I'll be interested to see where these lead. As we discussed this morning, there is a whole generation of young adults who are likely to be lost unless communities become more inclusive and proactive. I am definitely proactive and interfering with my grandchildren. I will not apologize for this. I was interested in your insight into the US communities. We recently hosted a couple from New Jersey, both of whom come from Shomer Shabbat homes and started married life following in that tradition. They have now moved religiously more to the left. They belong to two shuls, one Orthodox and one conservative. We had a discussion as to why this had happened. Interestingly, one of the main reasons was the fact that their children were all neurodiverse, and the conservative movement were more accepting and engaged with them. They have a social circle which is totally mixed religiously, and within their family, there is a mix of who keeps what. There's absolutely no judgment. It's particularly interesting to me how children can grow up in the same home and environment and yet choose different paths in life. You mentioned that it's important for grandparents to show the way. My mantra with my grandchildren is that I love you unconditionally, but I do not always love the things you do. I often tell my grandchildren that I know I am an interfering grandmother and that I will keep on being so, much to my own children's disapproval, but it appears the grandchildren don't mind. They still come or call to speak with us about their lives and often about religious or Jewish matters. I asked one several months ago about his love life. The answer, not one you would approve of, Grandma. At least he knows. I have a grandson who is currently traveling around Asia on his own. He has planned his trip meticulously. I mentioned that Chabad is everywhere and he should take that into account. My daughter told me off for interfering, but guess what? He wants a meat meal or needs a Seder, he goes to Chabad. He doesn't particularly seek out other Jewish travelers, but is pleased to inform us when he has. It's very worrying that there is virtually nothing to engage young people growing up, especially those who come from middle-of-the-road families. When my children were little, there was B'nai Akiva, Maccabi, London Board. Thank you, Nicole, who brought those memories of summer camp. FZY, BBYO, JLGB, Habanim, Association of Jewish Sixth Formers, Study Group, and I've probably missed out a few others. For my grandchildren, all young adults now, there were fewer. Manchester appears to have even fewer than London. One grandson had to come to Bushy to engage with BBYO before going on 3 occasions to BBYO conferences in the States. There was an active group here. Does it still exist? No. It was particularly worrying when we were given the news of Emmanuel College's closure. Gosh, I forgot that had even happened in the last week and a half. It's wonderful that the decision has now been reversed. It is a huge underused campus. It would be an ideal Jewish hub, such as those that they have in the States. Somewhere for all ages and stages, just an idea. As I said, Hashem works in mysterious ways. Everything within this email has been buzzing around in my head as well as my life for some time now. And hey presto, this is exactly what our session brought to the fore. The last few years have made people think about how precarious our lives as Jews have become. There is therefore the opportunity to now look proactively for ways of engaging our community. We are a tiny community, but we have a big heart. Bushy is a particularly warm and welcoming community. When we moved here, we were welcomed by all age groups. We have made friends here who are younger and much older. As you stated, age doesn't matter. We need to hold to the belief that no matter what, everyone is important and held dear. The current and next generation are those we need to think about and fight for. We must believe that it is possible. Where there's a will, there's a way. Thank you again for facilitating this wonderful group. So just on the neurodiverse, if you remember last session, I ran out because I went to the most incredible day organized by the United Synagogue and Norwood, and bringing in different organizations from all parts of the community and from non-Jewish organizations. It was a really incredible day, all about neurodiversity. And with my professional experience working as a Senko in a school, I have had a lot of experience with neurodiversity. I know a lot about it. I've supported people with it. But to come together and hear what there is out there, it's just remarkable. And that's within the Jewish community and beyond the Jewish community. So one of the talks I went to was from Camp Kef, which my children now volunteer. And I was there right from the beginning. My best friend set it up when there were just 4 children. Now they have over 100. And they support them not just in summer camps, but now during the year. And they were talking about the importance of friendship and the importance of community. And it just was this most remarkable space, buzzing space to be part of. And there were, you know, when we talk about interfaith and intrafaith, there were people there from all different backgrounds. It really felt incredible to be there. So I think this idea, and they called it belonging matters. And I think it's something that actually you don't need to be neurodiverse to appreciate. We all need to feel like we belong. That is the gift of community. Just one of the presentations, actually together with Kef, that they spoke about, 2 different ones I'll tell you about, both non-Jewish organizations, but I thought I was just amazed at what there is out there. So one of them, they decided that it shouldn't, or they need to make a space for young adults with additional needs across, you know, whatever the spectrum that would fit into this, that they should also be able to go out to a disco or a club. And they set up, I forgot what it's called now. Oh, what a shame. But the Bubble Club, I think it's called. I think it's called the Bubble Club. And they have whenever they run, I think it's run weekly now, and they have hundreds of young adults coming together like normal young adults would come together at a club with music. And there's quieter spaces. And before I raise any eyebrows that the Rebbetzens promoting clubbing, I'm not. But how wonderful that these people, these young adults, can also feel that they can be part of something. And actually one of the service users who now helps to run it was speaking, and it was just remarkable to listen to her. And another project that they shared was, I think it's the London Symphony Orchestra, that runs again workshops and then does concerts with, you know, people with quite profound special needs. It was really unbelievable to watch them banging and making music. And some of them are more musically gifted than others. Some of them are more capable of or comfortable with presenting in front of people. But you could just see how people who might have, a person who might have been so withdrawn could now come out of themselves and was banging and clapping and taking part in something. It was, as I said, truly something very, very special and very remarkable. So that was Monday. Wednesday. I'm not sure why it feels like what happened in Golders Green on Wednesday has touched an even, in a sense, maybe, an even more raw, or touched us even more deeply, even than Heaton Park, which doesn't really make sense. But there is obviously something. I mean, it's London, it's Golders Green. But I think that one of the senses that I had is that this feeling of tremendous sadness of not even being shocked by what happened. I think that's maybe where we're coming from, because I think when the horrendous tragedy at Heaton Park, I think we were all stunned. And I think now we've reached almost this space where it isn't shocking. And that's the shocking part.
More normality.
And it should never feel normal that somebody should be running through the streets looking for Jewish people to stab. That should never feel normal. The next day we were on Golders Green Road, as you do. We had actually the most incredible privilege and opportunity. Rav Herschel Schachter, who is the Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshiva University, is an incredible Torah giant. I've actually spoken about him here before. That he once, so we had the Mizrahi morning of learning for the rabbinate, and then afterwards we were invited to have lunch, just Elchanan and I and Rabbi Shul with him and his wife, which was a really incredible opportunity to sit with them in a restaurant on Golders Green Road. And what was interesting was, what I shared with you before is he once gave the most brilliant shir, brilliant to the extent that I really struggled to follow, like really like way above my head, but I tried to follow it along. It was really, he is a Torah genius, real genius. And then this was a few months after October the 7th. The next person who started his class was talking, I think, about the halachic side of, or the moral and halachic grounds of fighting, because of what was going on in Israel and the soldiers. And he stood up and he began his talk by saying that he comes from Modi'in, and unfortunately that morning 2 or 3 young men from his community had been killed. Now, this man who'd just seen the news, he literally had looked on his phone just before he started talking, knew these people, and you could hear in the way he shared it, it really affected him, right? Obviously. Rav Herschel Schachter was sitting in the seat in front of me, and he sobbed. You could see his body shaking, as if it was his son that you were talking about. And I'm sure he didn't know these young men, but he was carrying, and he feels the pain of the Jewish people. To me, that's greater than the greatest share he can give. The fact that he really cares about the Jewish people. So to be able to sit and have lunch with him was a real honor. Interestingly, so you have to understand that there's a difference between learning up the halachic, as if you were, I don't know, if you're talking about if a bull would fall into a pit, what would happen to it, etc. So that kind of, and then with the practical, like if something actually happens. So for example, let's do a different example, like you mix your milky soup with a meaty spoon, with a meaty knife that you've just cut onions with, right? So you can learn the Gemara and the Shulchan Aruch, and you can learn around the topic, but then practically what you have to do. And that's why I've always struggled with that, like theoretical learning. I don't love that side of learning, whether it's from Gemara, whether it's from Halacha. I struggle with that. Just tell me what to do. I'm much more like, I just need to know. Like, I don't want to know this one said this was, I just want to know what should I do, right? So he was speaking about whether we should be leaving the UK. He gave a Torah class, right? Looking at the different sources and bringing down the Gemaras, and his conclusion is that we should. Now, before everyone starts packing their suitcases, he also thinks that they should leave America. His reasoning, and our rabbi doesn't agree with him, so you're okay. If you want to go according to our rabbi and the rabbi he asked, but his reasoning is if you're in a place and people don't want you to be there, you should leave. Now, he's not saying the majority of people, because we know the majority of people don't want us to leave, but there are people in this country, as there are in America, who want the Jewish people to leave, right? We know there's a lot of hatred, anti-Semitism. So that's what his halachic understanding. I don't think if you would sit down with him and say to him, can you advise me? I live here, this is what I do, this is where my I don't know if he'd then say to you, yes, every single person should leave. I don't think that's what he was saying. But from learning an intellectual, do you understand the difference? You can understand what I'm saying? From learning an intellectual. And what I loved about, because every great rabbi needs a great wife, the great Rebbetzen, was his wife goes, don't be ridiculous. Nobody can just pick up and leave. And it's not so easy. And she was giving all the arguments that all of us say about how it doesn't really make sense. So you've got this unbelievably great rabbi saying, like, probably his halachic understanding is we should all be going to Israel. And then she's saying, well, no, that doesn't make any sense. So I just think that that's like such a wonderful dynamic for us to be able to witness. But I want to actually pull it back to something that happened earlier that day. So earlier that day, we heard from someone called Noah Lewis, who I would really like to bring to our community next Mizrahi weekend, because she is unbelievable. So she is she was a Rebbetzen in Australia for many years, actually. And she now, since October the 7th, she was running the Chevra Kadisha for the IDF. So you can imagine what sort of horrendous things she had to see. And her role in terms of speaking to the family, she is part of the IDF. So, you know, putting on her uniform, going to visit the families, trying to offer them some comfort, etc. And since then, and she was talking a little bit about that. But what I really liked about, so she was speaking to, it was a small group of Rebbetzins. She's a Rebbetzin herself. And she had prepared a shir. And then we kind of were asking her questions and wanted to kind of connect with her personally and learn from her personally. And what was amazing was the shir she prepared, which she didn't really have time. And actually, I thought I had the sources here, but I must have left them at home. But she didn't really have time to be able to teach it to us. She shared with us a little bit of it. But it had a wonderful title. And when she said the title, I thought, this is what we need to be talking about in Emunah. This is what I need to bring to our Monday Move to Friday group. There's a saying, I think, from the sages that, and I don't remember, again, I don't have the sheet in front of me, I don't remember in Hebrew, but any place that I'm walking in the land of Israel. And I think that what that saying is, and what she brought us lots of sources to understand, is that you can bring that being in the Holy Land to wherever you are. And I think for us right now, knowing that wherever we are, we can bring Israel, Jewishness, Jewish pride to every place that we're in. She shared with us an amazing story. She'd done, she used to work for an organization that funded Jewish different, she did like the finance side of it, but funded different Jewish communities in Eastern Europe. And she was in Lithuania. What's the capital of Lithuania? Was it? So yeah, but it wasn't in Vilna. I can't remember where she was. Anyway, maybe it wasn't in Lithuania. She was in somewhere in Eastern Europe. I can't remember. Because she funded, she was in charge of the accounts, basically. She'd gone to visit this senior center and they had a wonderful music group for Holocaust survivors. And, you know, she described how there was this Russian Jewish lady who was teaching them Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, you know, in the very, very heavy Russian accent. And they're all singing this song together. And she said there was a very elderly Holocaust survivor lady there who was crying. And she said to Noah, she said, you know, my dream, they were so grateful for, you know, Noah said it was as if she had personally given them money, and she's not, she's just in charge of the accounts, but it felt so wonderful to be able to support these remote communities. You know, we do take it for granted how much we have here, how easy it is for us here. And she said after the Holocaust, her dream was to go to Israel. And then she married and she had children, and her dream was to go to Israel. And her dream was to go to Israel, and her dream was to go to Israel. And she'd never made it to Israel. And she was crying because she was never going to be able to make it to Israel. And Noah said to her, in your heart, you're in Israel. It's okay. And I think that, you know, thank God, I'm assuming most people here have got on a plane and gone to Israel. How lucky we are. And please God, the flights should continue and we should be able to go and we should be able to be safe while we're there. And how blessed are we? But this lady had never been. But yet her love for the land of Israel was so strong. And what Noah was saying to us, I think, is so true, that we can have that love and that connection to Israel from him. We can really feel that. One of the things that was really special about something we did as a community was the fact that we connected with particular hostages. I think that really gave us so much to feel that connection. And I can't remember if I've shared in this group, but it could be that you've seen on social media. So our particular, one of the hostage that we had the longest, and that was only released at the end, was Elkanah Bachba. His wife's expecting. They had a cake reveal, they're having a baby girl, please God. And, you know, what better revenge? You know, we speak about sometimes like what better revenge to the Nazis, the fact that my grandparents decided to have a family. And now you think, what better revenge to Hamas? They're going to bring another beautiful Jewish girl, please God, in good health into the world. It's just unbelievable. So I think that's been really powerful to have that sense of connection to one of the. It feels like he was ours. He still feels like ours, right? There's something. All of them are, but there was something special about that. And I know that some of you were able to be with us over this past Shabbat, and not everyone was. So for those of you that it's repetition, it was worth repeating. I'm sure you'll agree. But for those of you who weren't, one of the things that actually Elchanan said at the end of Shabbat is he suddenly realized that we hadn't connected to a particular soldier who'd lost their lives till this past Shabbat. Okay, so till this past Shabbat, obviously every life lost hurt, and every soldier that's lost their life fighting is one of ours, and we love and we feel connected. But in the same way that having that one face and that one picture, I'm looking there because that's where it was, right? Just made us realize he was ours. He was Bushy's hostage. I think in the same way, to have this one soldier who lost his life is really, really powerful. And we had Rav, so again, I'm repeating for those who are here. I was just from, I didn't quite realize who we were having till Friday morning when he came to our home, and he started talking to me, and he started telling me, and he started showing me. And he's now our soldier. So we had Rav Doron Chittiz come, and he shared with us about his brother, Captain Yaron Chittiz. And he described to us, and there's lots about the story that obviously hit very close to home, and I shared some of those things with Rav Doron as well. But he shared with us how his baby brother, Yaroni, 15 years younger than him, is a family of 5, 4 boys and a girl. And his baby brother, whatever he did to the max. And he was a general in the army. And they were the first unit to go into Gaza. And they went into Gaza singing on a Friday, singing from, like we do in Shul, singing from Yedid Nefesh, going through all the songs, singing, till they got to a point where they had to stop singing because of where they were situated, and it was time to stop singing. And he shared with us so many things over Shabbat, but the particular one that I want to share, and I actually shared this at the next conference that I went to, which was on Sunday and Monday. I went to a conference in New York, and I shared with them this story, and I'm sharing it with you again. And as I said, I know many of you heard it, but it's worth repeating. Well, some of you heard it, I should say. So the Shabbat, on the 80th day of the war, Yaroni surprised their mother. The brothers knew, but he surprised his mother, and he came out of Gaza for Shabbat. And he came to their home, and you can imagine, they hadn't seen him for 80 days. 3 days later, he was killed fighting. So just to bear that in mind, they didn't know then this would be the last Shabbat, but he said it was the most unbelievable Shabbat. And they thought for sure he's not going to, he hasn't slept, he's hardly showered, he's not, like you can imagine 80 days of fighting, he's not going to want to come to Shul. Of course he came to Shul, right? The whole community he was from Ranana, the whole community, the whole Shul's dancing with him, etc. And then on Friday night, you can imagine everyone had so many questions and what's going and asking, and suddenly he banged on the table. And he read it out, and he said this. He said it in Hebrew, actually. I'm going to read it in Hebrew, and then I'll say it in English. He goes, Ein matzav sheba aza yashiru yoter zmirot Shabbat mipo. It can't be that in Gaza we sang more zmirot than here. We sang more songs of Shabbat than here. This is Yaroni. And so, of course, the whole family sang and sang and sang the whole Shabbat. Rav Doron spoke about it here. We had a beautiful Friday night dinner, 36 people. Yeah, it was. My Yehuda even said to me in Shul, he said to Elchanan, actually, he didn't ask me, but he said, this boy really wants to come back to ours for Friday night dinner. And I'm thinking, like, we have room for 32 people. We know our max. There is no extra room. Any of you have seen our table. You can't fit more. Somehow we had 36 people. Then we had a few more people joining us for a tish. Songs and singing and connecting. And then the next morning, he spoke so beautifully in Shul. And then the next morning, Shabbat morning's tiring for us, came home. Normally what our Shabbat morning looks like after we've had a big Friday night like that is we eat in about 20 minutes and then I go and have a really nice Shabbat shul. And this week, this past Shabbat, we had our meal and we took out our benches and we turned to song after song after song after song. And we sang in Yoroni's merit. It's completely changed what our Shabbat looked like. It completely changed. And I know why when we lived in Israel, we used to sing much more at the Shabbat table. I know exactly why we haven't. We often have guests. Most of them don't know the songs. The kids don't want to kind of have to be put on show. There's so many reasons. We're tired, right? Shabbat morning, it makes sense. Shabbat lunchtime, we're very tired. But we're going to sing now for Yoroni. Every Shabbat, every meal. And if you know Am Yisrael Chai, sing Am Yisrael Chai. And if you know Yedid Nefesh, sing Yedid Nefesh. And if you know Nine and Nine, sing Nine and Nine. But this is our Adon Olam, whatever Jewish song you know. And what I think is so powerful about this message, I actually want to bring Rav Doron back. He does this in Israel, but I want him to go to every single primary school, every single Jewish primary school, every single Jewish secondary school, and tell them about Yoroni. And tell them to sing. Because song and singing is such a beautiful way of connecting to our Jewishness, but also really connecting to Hashem. He shared with us when they found out that Yoroni had died, and they went to Shura, which is actually where this Noah Lewis had. That's where she was based. It was the base where they processed all the bodies, where they had the Chevra Kadisha. And we heard from Rabbi Bentzi Mann on Thursday night as well, all about it. So at this base, he said that this was the first time that the family asked if they could sing. And they asked if they could sing to Yoroni. And they stood around before his funeral. And Rav Doron explained that because he was so much older than him, and also actually their parents had divorced and his father was in South Africa most of the time, very often he was like the big brother, right? So he went to parent-teacher conferences and he looked after his baby brother. And very often he would sing Shema to him at night. And the song that he would sing is Hamalach. The Hamalach HaGoeloti, the angel that protects me, should protect the children. And they should Vikarei v'hem shemi, and they should call out in their name, the Shem Avatai, in the name of my parents, Avraham and Yitzchak, v'yidzgu la'rov b'karev ha'aretz, and they should multiply in abundance amongst the world. Again, actually, if we come back to this idea of the power of grandparents, right? This was Yaakov. Jacob said this to his grandchildren. Unbelievable strength and power in that. And they sang that around. And actually now, what Rav Doron said is that whenever they bring groups to Shura, they sing Hamalach with that group so that they can feel that connection. They sang Hamalach at the funeral. I really struggled when, after my mum died, I struggled to sing Hamalach to my children because that's something she sang to me and we sang with her as she was dying. It's a really beautiful song. Again, maybe I'll put it on the group so that you can listen to it. It's a really beautiful idea of the angels protecting us wherever we are, whatever we're doing. So we now all have, and I have some of the stickers, so please do take one and put it on your fridge, put it in your siddur, put it wherever it will be meaningful for you, but this can be all of our soldier. Yoroni can be someone that we all connect to. Rav Doron shared a letter that Yoroni wrote. I think it was in November, and the letter started by no 23-year-old should ever have to write this letter. And the hope is always when you write a letter like that, no one should ever need to see it because please God, you'll live. But obviously when he died, and that the fact that they got his phone back afterwards and that they read the message is a tremendous comfort. And they've now actually made a book with all these letters that soldiers are writing, or have soldiers who lost their lives that they wrote to their families. He said it goes next to their Tanakh, so it's the extra volume of the Bible, of the Torah. that's this book, as this holy, holy book. But that's one of the things that he shared with us. And again, anyone who wants it, it's available on Amazon. I can share the link with you. So I'm just thinking about the time and how much more I want to share. I'm going to share one more thing because I don't want it to get kind of lost in time, because next week I'm at a different conference and there'll be something else to share. So I want to share with you. Again, I know that a couple of you were there, but not many people were. Racheli Frankel, who is just an inspirational, unbelievable person, spoke about finding Hashem through trauma. Well, remember, Racheli was one of the mothers of one of the 3 boys who was killed back in 2014. Was it 2014? So passionate.
She the lady here on Thursday night.
Yeah. Amazing, wasn't she?
And she could talk so fluidly. I mean, look at the trial.
Unbelievable. Yeah, he was. I don't know if you remember, there were 3 boys and they took a lift, and horrendous. And that's what sparked Operation Cast Iron, maybe. I can't remember what it was called, but anyway, yeah, maybe it was the one. Unbelievable lady. What amazed me, she's a Torah teacher. She's always been a Torah teacher. So and she has actually come here before and told her story, which was a different type of class. Here she came to teach Torah, and the topic was talking about connecting to Hashem through trauma. But she brought down the sources of Rav Soloveitchik, who was her father's teacher, and she learned through the sources with us. And she really shared some amazing ideas. But I want to share there's actually 2 ideas, but I'm going to share one today because I've got so many other things. And one of them we'll learn through another time because it was so powerful as well. So this is something that she shared, which a friend of hers who had a child who was very sick and who passed away. This is something that her friend, who's called Achinoam Jacobs, must be, yeah. Achinoam Jacobs shared, and it was from something called Yisurim Va'ahava. Yisurim means suffering, and love, suffering and love. Okay, so I'm going to read that to you. Every time I heard statements that demanded something from me in the realm of faith, or those that tried to explain, to make sense of, or to give meaning to Rotem's illness, I would rebel from within. Do we really know everything there is to know about humans that we can presume to speak about God and his ways in the world? After all, this isn't a lecture or a Musa class, a class on self-improvement in the yeshiva. It's about a young, dear and beloved girl and her family who witnessed her suffering and embraces her in her agony. There's a Hebrew phrase that says, Yisurim kibel me'ahava, that torments must be accepted with love, right? People often will say you should accept whatever trial you're going through, accept it with love. Though these words would strike at me, this sentence would echo in my mind and my whole being would scream and rebel from within. If a person wants to accept his own suffering with love, let him accept it. But how can one accept another person's suffering with love? How can a mother accept the suffering of her daughter with love? This sentence in its various forms sometimes infuriated me, sometimes filled me with sadness. I never understood it, and I was unwilling to respond to it. Until one day, as our agony deepened, the meaning of the phrase became clear to me. Like a blind person whose eyes are suddenly opened, I realized that until now, I had not understood the teaching of the sages at all. Suddenly, I saw that what is written here is that when suffering comes upon a person and those close to them, one must enhance and strengthen oneself in the matter of love. The only thing we could give and receive without limit was love. The only thing we could do in the face of suffering was to love, to accept the torment by adding more love to Rotem. We must accept suffering with love, with great love for others, for people. This is the best, most beautiful, and most compassionate advice I have ever received. And this love grew purer. It grew stronger and stronger. The less we were able to heal the body, the greater and stronger our love became, until eventually it depended on nothing at all, not even on life itself. Ahavat olam ahavticha. I have loved you with an everlasting love. This idea of accepting things with love, I think, is a wonderful phrase for someone who feels that I'm going through a challenging time. I can accept it. I can feel Hashem's love. I know I am where I'm meant to be. I can feel this is what Hashem wants from me. That's fine if the person themselves wants to feel that. But I think this is such a beautiful way of Achinoam, the mother of Rotem, sharing that actually realizing that the response of not we must accept, like as in I love what's happening, or I can accept this with love, but more that that the more the suffering, the greater the love we feel, and even to the point where the love for the person suffering. I just think it's such a reframe and such a powerful way of thinking about it. And even this idea that as her daughter got sicker and sicker, there was so little she could do. But love is such a powerful thing that she could do. And she could love her daughter more and more, even to the point when she passed on. And I think for all of us who've lost someone, when someone passes away, we can love. We can still, the love never ends. The love is everlasting. I thought that was so powerful. And that connects in very powerfully to after this incredible Shabbat that we had. So we had the Racheli sharing with us on Thursday night. As I said, Noah shared with me on Thursday morning. Then we had the Shechters. Then Thursday night we had Rabbi Bentzi and Racheli sharing with us here. Then we had a Shabbat with an amazing Shabbat with Rav Daron. And then first thing on Sunday morning, at 5 in the morning, Echonon drove me to Heathrow, and I got on a plane and I flew to Newark. And only me stays from, I got there at 10 in the morning on Monday, and I was back in the airport by 4 I got there at 10 in the morning on Sunday, and I was back in the airport by 4 on Monday. I literally went from the airport to the hotel, and then stayed overnight, and then from the hotel back to the airport. So the one thing that I didn't do, which I would normally at a conference, I can't even call it jet lag. I think I was just tired. I just hadn't slept for a very long time. Was normally after the last session, which went on till 11:15, I would have stayed up for another 3 hours and talked to people. And those of you might have remembered my wonderful, amazing friend, Sarah Oppenheim, who lives in Charlotte in North Carolina. She was there. So we got to connect and be with each other. And she's really my soul sister, like a best friend. It was amazing to be with her. And so many other people that I have got to know. I went to an amazing conference, the first of its kind, where they brought together all religious women who work in the arc of end of life. What do we mean by that? So any religious women who support people as they are dying. So there was a religious palliative care doctor. There was a metastatic breast cancer nurse specialist. There was funeral directors. There were end of life doulas. There was, and then we had, and then after death, there was Chevra Kadisha. There's 2 religious funeral directors. How cool is that? So funeral there works completely different to here. It sounds very confusing, but you can go to a funeral home and have a Jewish burial through a non-Jewish funeral home. I'm very confused because all I know is amazingly bushy, or the other cemeteries that is Jewish, completely Jewish, and they take care of everything. It's a very strange, it feels a bit like the Wild West out there in America, I have to be honest. But there's 2 religious women who run funeral homes and support people at that stage of the families at that stage of their life, and support people who've, encouraging about the Chevra Kadisha. We had the most amazing panel about the Chevra Kadisha. I took part in a session that talked about supporting bereaved families. One of the amazing things was I was telling them a little bit about what we try to do and how it works. And how much more I would love to do. But I said, we have 1,600 families, and you could see every face go, it's like, it doesn't make any sense. I think the largest Orthodox shul in North America is maybe you're talking about 800 families. Like it actually doesn't make sense, right? We know this amazing community is too big. Not that we, God forbid, don't want people to be part of it, but like this is like a village. I mean, it is. Our community, 1,600 families is huge. But I shared with them some of the things that we as a community have experienced and done. And I shared with them the story about when Charlotte passed away and how amazingly our community who did or didn't know her stepped in and stepped up and showed love and carried it and felt it as a community. And then we had people talking about complex grief, when people are grieving and there was a panel about that and people can't move on. But one of the most amazing things was to see how a lot of the people, including the woman the lady whose idea this conference was, and who unbelievably pulled this unbelievable conference. There were people from Australia there. She pulled this conference together in 6 months. It's not humanly possible, but she is one of these unbelievable powerhouses. I have wonderful news for you, which is that what's the first Monday in June? Is it the 3rd or the 4th or the 1st? I can't remember. The first Monday in June, I will share with you. She's coming to give our Emunah class to us. So her name is Alyssa Felder. I have spoken a little bit about her before. Her firstborn baby passed away on the operating table. And at the time, she wasn't connected to, she's originally from the UK. She wasn't connected to Judaism in the way that she is now. And her life mission has really become to understand the Chevra Kadisha and understand what happens when one of the things that was very comforting to her was to hear from her friends that they had prepared her baby and prepared him for burial. And she's going to come in. I'm not going to share with her. Is the 1st? I thought it might be. Okay, thank you. The 1st of June, she will be coming here. And but this conference was really her idea. And her and so many others have taken the most horrific life experience and have used that field to create organizations that support people. To hear what organizations there were, and on the Sunday night, the last session was just an idea of people sharing stories together, and people shared about different tragedy or different reasons that they'd come to this space. I shared Daron's story because I felt that it was so brewing over, and I gave out the Zemirot stickers because I want everyone to start singing at their Shabbat tables and remembering Yaroni. But different people, one Rebbetzen shared about how she had a traumatic brain injury a few years ago, and the life that she thought she was going to have looks completely different to that life. And there are people who've set up organizations to support people through whether it was a miscarriage and stillbirth. And one of the ladies has had many, many, many of those. And she uses that experience to be able to support other people, just really unbelievable things. And at the conference, we spoke about some really challenging topics that don't get spoken enough about. We spoke about, and we heard from people whose family members have died from suicide. This isn't something that people come together at a conference and talk about. And we heard from, we spoke about the idea of sometimes when people have to, and you're talking about a very frum crowd. We talk about when people have to terminate a pregnancy and the grief and the secret around that and the privacy around that, and how to support people through that as well. And you would think that going to a conference like this, I would have walked out and felt sad and depressed and despair. And the only thing I came out thinking was, what an incredible people we are part of. Because one of the last sessions she spoke about, one of the ladies, this was the closing session, she spoke about the idea that God created a broken world. God put us into a world, and he gave us this world with this unbelievable light. And then the light had to be hidden from us because it was too strong. And we live in a world that's broken, and it's meant to be that way. And all of us are meant to go through things in our life. Nobody I know has a clear ride, has a straight ride. Everyone goes through things in life. But the challenge and the question and the opportunity for us is, what are we going to do with what we've been given? And to be in a conference of 100 women who've taken what they're doing, what they've gone through, and whatever it is that they've gone through, and they're using that to make the world a better place for other people. And we all came together to inspire each other. And this WhatsApp group, I can't keep up with it. Who wants to do this? And who wants to write guidelines on people going to shiva, what you should and shouldn't say? And who wants to make a curriculum in school to speak to children about death and dying? Because it shouldn't be that that's something that they don't feel like they have the vocabulary and the words to talk about. One of the speakers shared, I think it's a Jerry Seinfeld line, very well known, but this idea of she was sitting at a panel about to speak, and she said, the irony of that, the idea that people are more afraid to speak in public than of death, right? They did a survey. People are more afraid of public speaking than they are of death. And she said, that the irony is that, that means that everyone who is here who's speaking about death would rather die than to speak in public. But there is this really interesting concept of, we don't talk about dying. It's guaranteed, right? It's the only guarantee, right? We don't have conversations about it. And it doesn't mean that it needs to be, for somebody who finds out that they're very unwell. Anyone can talk about it. It's an okay thing to talk about. In fact, it's all over our prayers. We talk about it. There's so much, you can appreciate life more. And that's really what I came out of this conference feeling. I had such a much stronger appreciation for life from being at a conference like that. There was so much to talk about. There was so much to appreciate. There was so much to value. I'm sure all of us have felt this when you go to a Levaya or you go to a Shiva and you walk out and you just feel like, how blessed are we? We have another day. What a blessing. God wanted me here for one more day today. And I know these conversations aren't easy, and I know that it's very British, right? They're very American. Americans really talk about everything, but actually what a gift to have that. I actually did the end of life doula training course, and there's a whole group of people now who are religious people who are trained in this. But this idea of being able to have important conversations, and it doesn't need to wait till somebody's on their deathbed to share what it is that they want, what it is that they care about, what it is that's important to them. Because I think that when we know what's going to matter to us, please God, after 120 years, or however many years it is that God decides we should be on this world, it changes the way we're going to live. It does change, and I can see it from people in our community who are unwell or who have had life-changing situations or tragedies or wake-up calls. And it's changed them. And the choice, and this is always what it's going to come back to, being able to choose. The choice is always, do I choose for it to push me away? Listen, I know that there are plenty of people who weren't at that conference who probably are struggling to get out of bed. And we spoke about those sorts of people as well, right? Like I spoke about Alyssa. I know that there will be some women in the same situation as her who their life as they knew it ended with the loss of a child, and I could never judge. And you see that there are different people who, even if we think about October the 7th and since then, every family deals with things differently. That's okay. But to realize that at whatever point the choice is, and sometimes the choice might just be, do I get up out of bed this morning or not? And sometimes the choice might be, do I go and set up a not-for-profit that's going to support families around the world who are going through whatever bereavement they're going through? Both of those are choices, right? And I'm not judging one choice over the other, but to realize that we have choices And, you know, everyone here who chooses to come to be constantly talking about how we can have a connection with God despite, or maybe because of, everything that we go through in the world. To me, that really is something that is incredibly uplifting. And as I rushed back to the airport, the conference ended at 4, and the only reason that I left at 3:30 was because some of the Americans were saying to me, "You can't only get to the flight." My flight was at 5:50. You can't only get to the airport at 4:20 if your flight's at 5:50. It's an international flight, and you're gonna miss your plane. Okay, fine. So I was a little bit sensible. And my husband comes to the airport 3 hours beforehand, but I wasn't traveling with him, so it's fine, right? I'm the like get there 20 minutes before and beg them to let you on the plane. But so I did leave a few minutes early, but I really left with this sense of, first of all, I felt tremendously privileged that I was able to be there, and that it was through the organization that they supported me to be able to come over, specifically representing Rebbetzens, because I think that there's a very privileged position that we hold, that we carry people through. If you think of the Ark of Dying, and this is what I said when I stood up, I said we started by talking. They had it was beautifully done. They had a fictitious scenario of a lady who was unwell, and they were speaking through like what happens at each stage along the journey. So I said, what's so lovely, and they called her Miriam. I said, you've journeyed with Miriam. I said, what you don't know is that I've known Miriam for the last 10 years. And I've been at, you know, the birth of a child or the bar mitzvah or a wedding. And it didn't begin their life when these organizations all step in at the point where there's a terminal diagnosis, or at the point where it's end of life care, which are all amazing. I said, what's unbelievable is that we see the full spectrum of life, and we get to know people way before that point. And it is really a tremendous privilege. It doesn't always happen, right? And I explained this to them. They said, how do you cope with such a big community? I said, there's a tremendous amount of guilt. I wish I had more hours in the day to do more. It's impossible. And I think part of it is knowing that it's impossible. But sometimes when there are people that I've got to really know, and then they go through this arc of dying, and their family goes through it, it's such a tremendous privilege. And then you see the family afterwards, and you see them afterwards coming, and you see them re-embracing life in a different way. There is tremendous opportunities of light and love that we can find at the most challenging of times. And I think for me, if we think about everything that's happened in the last week and a half, but for me thinking about how interesting it was that last Monday we spoke about all different sorts of Jews. And I promise you that on Wednesday, not one of us thought, I wonder what colour shirt, what type of kippah either of the people who were stabbed in Golders Green was wearing. All any of us thought of was, they're my brother, and I hope they're okay. And nobody should ever be walking around and be attacked because of who they are, because of their Jewish. And I think that just to keep coming back to reminding ourselves, we are so blessed to be part of an incredible, incredible people. Mi ka'amcha Yisrael, who is like our amazing, amazing people. And as in the words of Yaroni, I will end with this gorgeous phrase, our strength is in our unity. If we want to be strong, if we want to beat our enemies, and we will stay united. That is our strength. Anyone who wants, I have some of the extra stickers. I'm sorry that we didn't have time to, I have about another 10 things I needed to share. So hopefully next time, the conference on, next week, I'm going to the European Rebbetzins conference in Munich, and for 3 days. So I'm hoping there won't be too much there, so I'll still be able to remember to come. But there's always that, you know what's amazing? You look around the world, there's always something to share. There's always beauty that we can come together and share together. But please do continue sharing your